I had imagined this trip would be a new beginning, a chance to reconnect with James after years of distance and silence. At 65, I was ready to leave behind the loneliness that had crept into my life after my wife passed. The idea of spending time with my son in a foreign land filled me with hope. I pictured us sharing laughter over meals, exploring cobbled streets, and filling the gaps that time had carved between us. But as the plane touched down, a cold knot of unease began to tighten in my chest. The airport was bustling with travelers hurrying to reunions or rushing to catch onward flights. I clutched my small bag tighter, scanning the sea of faces for a familiar one. James had promised he would be there to greet me, that he'd take care of everything. But as the minutes stretched and the arrivals hall emptied, the truth settled in like a bitter fog. No one was waiting for me. I approached the information desk, hoping to find some guidance. The clerk's polite but distant smile did little to comfort me. My heart pounded as I searched for my phone, only to realize it was missing from my pocket. Panic surged. I frantically checked my bag. No phone, no wallet, no identification beyond the passport I still held. How had this happened? The memory of the taxi ride from the airport to the city was a blur. I had been so focused on the reunion that I hadn't noticed the wallet slipping from my pocket. Sitting on a cold bench near the baggage claim, I felt the weight of my years press down on me. I was a man stranded in a foreign land, without a plan, without the tools to navigate this unexpected exile. The thought of calling James seemed futile. I had no phone, no way to reach him or anyone who could help. The crowd moved around me like a river, indifferent to the turmoil within. Then, a folded piece of paper caught my eye on the floor near where I sat. I unfolded it with trembling hands and found a message scrawled in James's handwriting. "I'm sorry, Dad, I can't do this anymore. You'll have to manage on your own." The words stung like a slap. I reread them, disbelief mingling with hurt. How could my son, the boy I had raised through sleepless nights and endless sacrifices, abandon me in such a heartless way? The years flashed before my eyes, teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, working extra shifts so he could have a decent life. I had been there through his failures and triumphs, through illnesses and heartbreaks. And now here I was, discarded like a worn-out coat. Memories of our last phone call surfaced. James's voice was distant, clipped, as if burdened by something I couldn't understand. He had promised this trip would be different, that we'd build new memories together. But now I saw that promise for what it was, a facade, a cruel pretense masking indifference. I rose from the bench, the message burning in my pocket. I wandered the terminal, hoping for a friendly face or a sign of kindness. A mother soothed her crying child nearby, a couple embraced in joyful reunion, but for me, there was only the cold hum of fluorescent lights and the echo of my own footsteps. I found a small cafe and sat down, trying to gather my scattered thoughts. My stomach churned with hunger and anxiety. I had no money, no phone, no plan. The language around me was foreign and unintelligible. Each passing hour deepened my isolation. As the sun dipped below the horizon outside the large windows, loneliness wrapped around me like a shroud. I thought of James again, of the boy I had once held close, whispering promises of protection and love. Had I failed him? Had my love been a chain, binding him to a life he resented? A part of me wanted to give up, to sink into despair, but another, quieter part held fast to the fragments of hope I had clung to all these years. I was a survivor. I had faced hardships before. This wasn't the end, not yet. I resolved to find help. I asked a passerby to borrow their phone, managing to call a local embassy number I had memorized before the trip. The voice on the other end was calm but distant, explaining that assistance was limited and that I would need to seek shelter until arrangements could be made. I thanked them, feeling a mix of gratitude and frustration. That night, I sat on the cold floor of a crowded waiting area, surrounded by strangers but feeling utterly alone. The faces around me blurred into shadows. I thought about the years I had devoted to raising James, the sacrifices I had made silently, the dreams I had held for him. And now those dreams lay shattered, replaced by a crushing sense of abandonment. As sleep eluded me, I wondered how a sun could turn so cold, how the bond that once seemed unbreakable could dissolve into silence and rejection. Yet beneath the pain, a spark flickered, a determination to understand, to survive, and perhaps someday to confront the son who had left his father stranded in a strange land. Dawn brought no relief, only the harsh light of reality. I was here alone with nothing but memories and a fragile hope that this nightmare could somehow be undone. The journey I had imagined was not the one I was living, but I was still breathing, still fighting to find my way. And that, I told myself, was the first step toward reclaiming the life I thought I had lost. A week before I found myself stranded and abandoned, my heart was full of anticipation. James had called me with a tone I had not heard in years, warm, almost eager. He spoke of a fresh start, a chance to bridge the gap that time and distance had carved between us. "Dad, this trip will be the beginning of something new," he said, his voice carrying a rare conviction. I clung to those words as if they were a lifeline, eager to believe that my son wanted me in his life again. In those days leading up to the flight, I was consumed with planning. I researched the city, marked the places we could visit together, the cafes where we might share stories, the parks where we could sit for hours just watching the world go by. I imagined the two of us walking side by side, the past melting away with every step. I even bought a new jacket, hoping to look my best for this reunion. Our phone calls were the highlight of my days. James spoke of his work, his hopes, the little things that had changed since we last spoke. He asked about my health, about my life back home. There was an undercurrent of something unspoken, perhaps a hesitation or a secret, but I chose to ignore it. I wanted to trust him, to believe in the promise of this trip. Yet as the days passed, subtle signs began to surface. During one call, his responses became clipped, almost distracted, as if his mind was elsewhere. When I brought up plans for our trip, he would brush off details with vague answers, promising to take care of everything but never offering specifics. The warmth I had sensed before flickered and dimmed, replaced by an elusive coolness I couldn't quite place. I tried to push these doubts aside, telling myself that stress at work or personal troubles might be weighing on him. I reminded myself that James was not the boy I had raised, the same one who clung to my hand in the dark, but a man burdened by his own struggles. Still, I held fast to the hope that beneath the surface he cared. One evening, just a few days before my departure, I called him to confirm our plans. His voice was distant, almost reluctant. "Dad, everything's set, just get here," he said, and then the line went dead. I stared at the silent phone, a cold unease settling in the pit of my stomach. I tried calling back, but the number went straight to voicemail. I left messages, each one more desperate than the last, but none were returned. My heart ached with confusion. Was this some misunderstanding, a momentary lapse? I wanted to believe it was. Despite the gnawing doubts, I pressed forward with my preparations. I told myself that once I was there, face to face with James, the distance would dissolve. I imagined the moment we would embrace, the apologies exchanged, the laughter shared. I clung to these images like a lifeboat in a storm. Packing my bags, I found myself rehearsing what I would say to him, how I would explain my loneliness, my desire to reconnect. I thought of the years I had spent supporting him through every hardship, working late nights to pay for his tuition, attending every recital and game, nursing him through illnesses. I had sacrificed so much for his happiness. Surely he remembered that. The night before I flew out, I barely slept. I lay awake, picturing the reunion, wondering if I was about to step into a dream or a nightmare. I told myself that no matter what, I would face it with an open heart. But even in those moments, a quiet voice whispered warnings I tried to ignore. The way James had avoided details, the coldness that crept into his voice, it all felt like cracks in a fragile facade. I pushed the voice down, drowning it with hope. When I boarded the plane, I carried with me a fragile trust, a fragile hope that this journey would heal the wounds time had inflicted. I imagined James waiting at the airport, a smile lighting his face, arms open wide. I pictured us walking together through unfamiliar streets, rebuilding what had been lost. Now, sitting alone in this foreign airport, that hope seems like a cruel illusion. The promises, the reassurances, they were all shadows vanishing in the harsh light of reality. I realize now that I was blinded by love, unwilling to see the warning signs that whispered of betrayal. But even as the pain cuts deep, I am trying to hold on to something, perhaps the memory of that week when hope was still alive, when I believed in the possibility of a new beginning. It is a memory that both wounds and sustains me, a reminder of how much I wanted to believe in my son. As I sit here, uncertain and alone, I wonder how the boy I raised turned into a stranger, how the bond we shared could be so easily broken. Yet somewhere beneath the hurt, a quiet resolve begins to stir. I may have been deceived, but I am not defeated. And perhaps someday the truth will come to light, and the promises of that hopeful week will mean something more than empty words. Days slipped by in a haze of uncertainty and quiet desperation. I wandered the city streets, each corner foreign and unwelcoming, the language around me a constant reminder of my isolation. The weight of James's betrayal pressed down on me heavier with every passing hour. It wasn't just that he had left me here, it was the deliberate cruelty of it all. I had soon learned that my return ticket had never existed. I was truly stranded, trapped by my own son's cold indifference. At first, I refused to believe it. Surely this was some terrible mistake. I scoured through my belongings again and again, hoping to find a forgotten ticket or perhaps a note explaining the absence, but nothing appeared. The realization settled like ice in my veins. James had planned this from the start, ensuring I had no way to leave. My mind drifted back to the years I had poured into raising him, the sleepless nights when he was sick, the long hours I worked to provide for him, the sacrifices that seemed endless. I had wanted nothing more than to give him a better life, to shield him from the hardships I had known. And yet here I was, abandoned in a strange land by the very son I had fought so hard to support. The pain was not only in the abandonment but in the betrayal, a violation of the bond I had believed unbreakable. I thought about the promises James had made, the calls filled with warmth that now felt like cruel jokes. How had it come to this? Had I failed him? Or had he simply grown bitter, resentful of what I had given? Amidst the swirling emotions, a spark of resolve began to kindle within me. I was not going to be a passive victim left to fade away in this foreign place. The years of endurance and perseverance that had shaped me would not be undone by this cruel act. I would find a way to regain control, to reclaim my dignity. I sought out the local authorities, hoping for guidance. The language barrier made communication difficult, but with patience and gestures I managed to explain my predicament. They were sympathetic but limited in their ability to assist. They advised me to contact my embassy, which I had already done, but the process was slow and bureaucratic. With no immediate solutions, I turned to the kindness of strangers. A small cafe owner, noticing my distress, offered me a meal and a place to rest. She spoke little English but understood enough to offer comfort. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it meant the world. In the quiet moments between uncertainty and hope, I reflected on the sacrifices I had made for James. Every decision, every hardship endured had been for his sake. I had hoped for gratitude, for love, but what I was met with was silence and coldness. It was a painful reckoning, but it also sparked a determination to fight back. I began to reach out to old friends and acquaintances back home, using borrowed phones and internet access. I needed to let someone know what had happened, to build a support network that could assist me from afar. Each call was a lifeline, a reminder that I was not entirely alone. The more I learned, the clearer it became that James had no intention of helping me. His actions were calculated, a betrayal that cut deeper than I had imagined. But instead of breaking me, it fueled a growing fire inside, a need to take control of my story, to refuse to be erased. In moments of solitude, I allowed myself to feel the hurt and confusion, but I never let despair consume me. I was a man who had faced hardship before, and I would face this too. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was resolved to navigate it with whatever strength I could muster. I found a small, modest shelter where I could rest safely, surrounded by others who had their own stories of loss and survival. Their quiet resilience inspired me, reminding me that hardship need not define us. Together, we shared moments of humanity in the face of adversity. As days turned into a week, I began to piece together a plan. I would find a way to return home to confront this betrayal and to reclaim the life James had tried to take from me. The path was unclear, but the first step was to refuse to be a victim. I clung to this resolve as the city around me moved on, indifferent to the quiet battle unfolding within me. The betrayal had shaken me to my core, but it had also awakened a strength I thought I had lost. I was determined to fight to survive and to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The shelter was a modest place, walls worn and paint chipped, but it offered a refuge from the relentless uncertainty outside. It was there, amidst the murmurs of other stories and the quiet clatter of daily routines, that I stumbled upon something that pierced through the fog of confusion: messages from James to mutual acquaintances, messages that exposed a web of lies and deceit. At first, I couldn't believe what I was reading. James had been speaking ill of me, painting a picture of a frail, unstable father incapable of managing his own affairs. He had justified abandoning me, casting himself as a reluctant hero, burdened by a responsibility he never wanted. The betrayal cut deeper than the physical distance between us. His words were a poison meant to isolate me further, to discredit me in the eyes of those I had once trusted. The realization was a brutal blow, but it also crystallized my purpose. I could no longer remain silent or passive. If James was willing to manipulate and lie, then I needed to protect myself through every means available. I resolved to seek legal counsel, to understand my rights and explore options to regain control over my life and assets. Reaching out was daunting. I had no phone, no stable internet connection, and limited resources. But determination propelled me forward. Through the kindness of a fellow shelter resident, I managed to contact Miss Reynolds, a trusted lawyer back home who had helped my family in the past. Explaining my situation over brief, fragmented calls, I felt a flicker of hope. Miss Reynolds listened patiently, her voice steady and reassuring. She outlined the steps we could take: investigating James's attempts to gain power of attorney, securing my assets, and preparing for any legal battles ahead. She emphasized the importance of documentation, urging me to gather any evidence I could find of James's betrayal and manipulation. Armed with this support, I began piecing together the fragments of my ordeal. I collected the messages James had sent, notes from the shelter, and records of my communications. Each piece was a thread in the tapestry of deception I was unraveling. The process was exhausting but necessary. It gave me a sense of agency, a way to fight back against the erasure James had tried to impose. The days in the shelter blurred into one another, but my resolve sharpened. I was no longer the abandoned father waiting to be rescued. I was transforming into a man ready to reclaim his dignity and rights. The anger and hurt that had threatened to consume me were channeled into a quiet strength, a strategic focus on the path ahead. With Miss Reynolds's guidance, I began drafting letters and legal documents, preparing to confront the lies and protect what was mine. The idea of facing James again was daunting, but I knew it was necessary. This was not just about property or money, it was about reclaiming my life from the shadow he had tried to cast. During quiet moments, I reflected on the journey from despair to empowerment. The betrayal had shattered many illusions, but it had also revealed a resilience I hadn't fully recognized in myself. Each step I took was a declaration that I would not be silenced or erased. I reached out to a few trusted friends and family members back home, carefully explaining the situation. Their support was a balm to my spirit, reminding me I was not alone in this fight. Some were shocked by James's actions, others had suspected something was amiss but lacked proof. Together, we began to form a network of allies. Despite the challenges, I felt a growing sense of control. The legal process was slow and complex, but every small victory, whether a returned phone call or a signed affidavit, was a step toward reclaiming my life. I was learning to navigate a world that had suddenly become unfamiliar, armed with determination and the support of those who believed in me. The shelter, once a symbol of my vulnerability, became a place of transformation. I met others who had faced their own betrayals and losses, and their stories inspired me. We shared moments of quiet resilience, offering each other strength in the face of adversity. As weeks passed, I began to envision a future beyond this place, a future where I could return home, confront James, and rebuild what had been damaged. The path was uncertain, fraught with legal battles and emotional turmoil, but I was ready. In the depths of this ordeal, I discovered a truth that no betrayal could take away. My worth was not defined by the actions of others, but by the strength I found within myself. I was no longer just a victim. I was a man preparing to stand tall and reclaim his story. Stepping through the front door of my own home, I was struck by how unfamiliar it felt. The air was heavy with neglect, and the rooms echoed with an emptiness that gnawed at my soul. James's absence was more than physical. It was a scar etched into every corner of this space I had once filled with laughter and memories. The house was in disarray, drawers left open, belongings scattered as if tossed aside in frustration or contempt. It was a silent testament to the disrespect that had invaded my sanctuary. I walked slowly through each room, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. This was not just about a messy house. It was a symbol of how James had trampled over the years we shared, disregarding the love and sacrifices I had poured into raising him. The sight ignited a fire within me, a fierce determination to reclaim what had been desecrated and to confront the son who had brought this chaos into my life. With the support of Miss Reynolds, I arranged a meeting with James. The day of the confrontation was heavy with tension. As he entered the room, there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced by a guarded expression. I looked at the man before me, the son I had nurtured, now a stranger hardened by indifference and deceit. I spoke firmly, laying bare the pain and betrayal I had endured. I reminded him of the sacrifices I had made, the sleepless nights and relentless work to provide him with a better life. I spoke of the trust he had shattered, the promises he had broken with cruel precision. My voice did not waver, though inside the hurt was raw and deep. James tried to justify his actions, weaving excuses and blame, but I stood unwavering. This was my moment to reclaim my narrative, to demand accountability for the emotional and material damage he had caused. I was no longer the passive figure he could manipulate. I was a man asserting his rights and dignity. The legal measures we had prepared came into play swiftly. Miss Reynolds had secured a restraining order barring James from entering my home or contacting me. It was a bittersweet victory, a necessary step to protect myself, yet a painful acknowledgement of the fractured relationship between father and son. The police were involved to enforce the order, their presence a stark reminder of how far things had fallen. Standing there, watching the man who once was my closest kin being removed from my life, I felt a complex mix of sorrow and relief. The battle was not over, but this was a reclaiming of my space, my life, my story. In the days that followed, I focused on restoring my home and my peace. With the help of friends and neighbors, I began the slow process of repair and renewal. Each cleaned surface, each repaired lock was a step toward healing. The house, once marked by betrayal, slowly transformed back into a refuge. I also took steps to protect my assets, working closely with Miss Reynolds to ensure that James could no longer interfere with my finances or personal affairs. The legal safeguards were a shield against further harm, a foundation upon which I could rebuild my independence. Family members who had been caught in the crossfire began to rally around me. Many had been unaware of the full extent of James's actions, and as the truth emerged, they distanced themselves from him, offering me their support and understanding. It was a small but vital circle of trust in a world that had felt increasingly hostile. Through it all, I held on to the belief that healing was possible even if the scars remained. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, a reclaiming not just of property but of self. I was no longer defined by the betrayal but by the courage to face it and move forward. Each day brought new challenges but also new opportunities to rebuild. I found solace in the simple routines of home, tending to the garden, lighting candles in the evening, listening to the quiet hum of life resuming its course. These acts were small rebellions against the darkness that had threatened to consume me. The journey was far from over, but in reclaiming my home and standing firm against James's betrayal, I had taken back a piece of my life. The road ahead would require strength and resilience, but I was ready to face it on my own terms, determined to protect the story that was rightfully mine. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the familiar rooms I had fought so hard to reclaim. Sitting on the porch, a cup of tea warming my hands, I felt a quiet peace that had eluded me for so long. The house, once a battleground of betrayal and pain, now stood as a testament to resilience and renewal. The legal battles were behind me, the restraining orders in place, and my assets secured. James's shadow had receded, his attempts to control my life thwarted by the steadfast support of Miss Reynolds and the unwavering circle of family and friends who had rallied around me. Their belief in my strength became a foundation upon which I rebuilt not just my home, but my spirit. In the weeks following the confrontation, I found solace in the simple acts of daily life. Tending to the garden, nurturing the flowers that had survived neglect became a meditation, a way to cultivate hope and growth amid the remnants of past hurt. Lighting candles in the evening, their flickering flames a symbol of endurance, I reclaimed the warmth that had once made this house a home. Reflecting on the journey, I realized that James's betrayal, while devastating, had also become a catalyst for personal growth. The pain forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, to face the fragility of relationships, and ultimately to discover a strength I hadn't fully known. I was no longer defined solely by my role as a father or by the wounds inflicted, but by the woman who had endured and emerged with dignity intact. Family ties, once strained and fractured, began to mend in their own time. Some relatives, disillusioned by James's actions, chose to distance themselves from him and to stand with me. Their presence was a balm, reminding me that love and loyalty could still be found, even when betrayal had threatened to sever the bonds that mattered most. Yet, amidst this healing, I understood that the scars remained. Trust, once broken, is not easily restored. I approached new relationships with caution, guarding my heart while remaining open to the possibility of connection. This balance was delicate but necessary. Each morning on the porch was a reminder of the new chapter I had begun, a chapter where I was the author, free to shape my story without fear or constraint. The quiet of the neighborhood, the gentle rustling of leaves, and the distant laughter of children playing became the soundtrack to a life reclaimed. I thought often of the son I had raised, the boy who had once clung to me with hope and love. While the man he had become was a stranger marked by betrayal, I chose to hold on to the memory of that boy not with bitterness, but with a bittersweet tenderness. It was a part of my past I could neither erase nor deny. In embracing the future, I also embraced myself, a woman shaped by love and loss, by struggle and survival. The journey had been arduous, marked by heartbreak and resilience, but it had led me here to a place of quiet strength. As the sun rose higher, casting its warm light over the porch and garden, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. For the friends who stood by me, for the legal allies who fought my corner, and for the inner reserves of courage I had found when it mattered most. This was not just a story of betrayal and loss, but of healing and hope. The road ahead was mine to walk, with all its uncertainties and possibilities. And as I sipped my tea, surrounded by the life I was rebuilding, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next, stronger, wiser, and fiercely determined to protect the story that was and always would be my own.